Hello, and welcome to my lecture on the chapter 14 topic of living well, stress, coping, and life satisfaction in adulthood. Learning objectives for chapter 14, identify needs that must be met for adults to have subjective and psychological well-being and suggest approaches that meet needs and support life satisfaction, as well as assess levels of stress and the effects of stress on the individual and suggest interventions for coping, building resilience, and cultivating physical and emotional wellness. Life satisfaction. What is a well-lived life? Happiness is a focus of intense current interest. Happiness and subjective well-being, SWB, are often used synonymously, and they represent both cognitive and emotional elements. So what does that mean? Cognitive and emotional elements, that means represents both thought behavior as well as emotions that people experience. So in terms of measuring life satisfaction, some are using a rating system like Cantrell's ladder, which you'll see in the next slide. There's also an experience sampling method that's been used involving beepers and recordings of activities and feelings at any given moment, as well as what's called day reconstruction method, DRM, where you combine the experience of sampling and memories of affective experience, right? So how do we measure life satisfaction? These are some different methods. And it could be as simple as journaling instead of using a beeper. Journaling how much you feel happy versus sad versus angry versus annoyed versus numb from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. or whatever the hours are that somebody's awake. It could be a really great way to track mood, especially for a client that isn't sure of a mental health diagnosis. So if they're not sure whether they've got bipolar disorder or persistent depressive disorder, which used to be called dysthymia, or generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and these different things, or even PTSD, you could use mood journaling as a means of discovering if there are any trends, ebbs and flows in their mood, and help them to take that data, if you will, to a psychiatrist for diagnosis and perhaps medication if that's something they're interested in using. So Cantrell's ladder, I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you, also called the Cantrell self-anchoring scale. So it uses a ladder here. So the Cantrell scale, which has been used by a wide variety of researchers since its initial development by Dr. Hadley Cantrell, is an example of one type of well-being assessment. So the way that this works is that suffering is rated from 0 to 4. Struggling is rated from 4 to maybe 6. So they're not thriving or suffering necessarily. They're just kind of struggling. And then it's a moderate present life. Thriving would be rating their present life 7 or higher. And they have an outlook over 5 years. So they have future vision. Oh, in 5 years, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to accomplish that. Right? Okay. And why would this be useful? So if you had a client with depression, think for a moment to yourself, what is one of the things that comes up with depression? Having to do with outlook. Maybe you don't know. I'm going to give you a second to think about it. What happens to someone's outlook that is clinically depressed? It becomes bleak. So they have a negative outlook on the future. So everything's going to suck. It's always going to suck. It's never going to get better. Everything's going to remain crappy, if you will. And so for persons that you work with that you notice have a bleak outlook, this ladder could be a good way to help yourself measure, help the client measure, patient measure, whether their depression is improving across treatment. So I know we're just getting started in treatment, but I want to kind of get a look at an inside look at how you view your future, how you rate your life. So looking at this ladder, 0 to 10, 10 being you are thriving and your life is great and you're looking forward to things that are happening, where would you rate your life right now? 0 to 10. 0 to 4 would be suffering, and 4 to 6 would kind of be you're just struggling. You're not really suffering, but you're not thriving. Where do you think you lie on this ladder? And you can take that information, put it in your notes, and later down the line, after you've done a handful of sessions, you could reassess where they feel they are on this ladder. So cool little handout that you could use, cool little image you could use. There's even a graphic or a worksheet, if you will, on Therapist Aid that you can use as well. It's not called Cantrell Ladder. I don't think it's something else. It's called scaling or something of that nature. So worldly goods and well-being. There's an American paradox, or it's also called Easterlin's paradox, the inverse ratio of affluence to pathology. So materialistic goals don't equal happiness. They have toxic side effects. So that's to mean that stuff doesn't make you happy. There's actually negative side effects of having a lot of material goods or having happiness be rooted in materialism. And there's a rising income that correlates with subjective well-being, SWB, if it increases purchasing power and optimism about the future, and if social trust and reduced income equality also exist. So increased income correlates with subjective well-being if there's social trust and reduced income inequality. Sources of the paradox of wealth. So there's the hedonic treadmill effect, or hedonic. I think it's hedonic because of hedonism. Fewer supportive relationships and the pursuit of a perfect life. Maximizers of wealth are obsessed with the best choice belief. So to have the best of everything. Right? I have to choose the best. I have to own the best. And then satisficers believe that good enough is acceptable. So they're satisfied and good enough is just fine. Right? So what is this hedonic treadmill effect? So what it is a circle, it's a cycle, where let's just say we start right here. We desire something. And so we strive to get it. And then we obtain it. And we enjoy it for a bit. Then we kind of adapt, the new feeling wears off, the novice nature of it wears off, and then we want something else. Or maybe we want more of that thing. So 1 boat's not enough, we need 2 boats. 3 boats aren't enough, we need 4. 2 houses isn't enough, I need another vacation home somewhere else. I have 1 diamond ring, but I could have more diamond rings. I want some more of that. Right, so that novel effect, that novice stimuli of the new thing wears off, and you end up desiring more or desiring something new, which leads to desire again. And then you strive for that new thing again. You try to get that new thing again, then you enjoy that thing, and then you adapt again, and round and round and round and round you go. That's why perhaps you never get satisfied with the clothing that you have. Perhaps you never get satisfied with the jewelry that you own, the watch, the sunglasses, the shoes, the new purse, the new backpack, the new wallet, the new cowboy boots. We're in Texas, right? The new horse, maybe, if anybody out here is equine person. So you want something new because the new feeling wears off, right? And how does this apply to clients? Can you think of a particular population that this may apply to? How about the addiction population? Whether it's substance related, sex related, just addictive behavior related, kleptomania, stealing. That new feeling wears off. They want more. I need more weed. I need more alcohol. I need another purse. I need more porn. I need more whatever it is. I need to steal another car. I don't have enough. Right. And so the hedonic treadmill, hedonic treadmill while in this PowerPoint, it's related to well-being and the paradox of wealth, it very well could also be applied to addiction behaviors or even people that are wanting pets or just really anything. So it could leave one's happiness kind of loosely defined instead of being a strongly defined thing. So personality and well-being, personality traits correlate with subjective well-being. Extroversion is positively related with well-being, and that's to say that if you're extroverted, that's a positive correlation to being someone with well-being. And neuroticism, which is viewing things negatively, is negatively related. So that's to say that if you're neurotic, well-being would go down. And then conscientiousness is also positively related to later life well-being. And what is conscientiousness? Conscientiousness is being mindful and aware of what's going on within you and around you. And so that's to say that if you're a conscientious person, that could help you with having well-being later in life. And what does that matter? Well, you can talk about that with clients in terms of working on their cognitive behavior, working on their outlook on life. So if you get a client that comes in that's very neurotic, this could be a point for motivating them to work on their cognitive behavior. So I understand you've had a lot of really hard stuff that's made you start to believe the world is in a very positive place. And I can understand that from what you've told me. But research shows that neuroticism is negatively related to subjective well-being. And if you want to be happy, we got to start working on thinking more positively. And you start helping them to do maybe some Socratic questioning, or maybe you start helping them with some cognitive restructuring or some reality testing, because maybe they're assuming things are negative that actually aren't, right? Personality moderates the effect of money on happiness. So reciprocity exists between personality traits and well-being. So that's to say that personality can lend to or take away from well-being. And more positive and less negative affect is experienced with higher levels of agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness, as well as emotional stability. Okay, so if you have higher agreeableness, higher extroversion, higher conscientiousness, and higher emotional stability, you have more likelihood of having a more positive affect, a less negative affect, if you will. Relationship and well-being. So quality and quantity of social relationships is linked to life satisfaction in adulthood. So that's to say, how good your social relationships are and how many social relationships you have a strong link to how satisfied you are as an adult. Men and women are vulnerable to depression without strong positive interpersonal bonds. So that's to say you are more likely to have depression if you don't have strong and positive interpersonal bonds. If you have weak negative bonds, you're more likely to feel depression. Marriages and long-term intimate partnerships are a major source of companionship in Western societies, and there's a lower risk of depression should one have a marriage and long-term intimate partnership in their life. Across cultures, there are consistent findings on the importance of social relationships for well-being. There are different patterns in individualistic and collectivist cultures. Harmony collectivism is the norm for East Asians, and then convivial collectivism is preferred for Latino cultures. And excuse me. And I just realized I forgot to define the convivial collectivism. Let me look that up for you real quick. So convivial collectivism is Focus on creating and preserving positive and smooth functional relationships through positive, it's loading. And Bible. Okay, so let's copy paste this over here for you guys to see it. Oh, well, that didn't fit, did it? Okay, so and this is from a Quizlet that I just found. And there's the Quizlet link if you want to go to it. So simpatia or respeto, there's a focus on creating and preserving positive, smooth, functional relationships through positive emotionality. There's open and frequent positive emotion expression, and all collectivists are not the same. That is what a study by Campos and Kim showed. And then with harmony collectivism, this very same study by Campos and Kim, I'll just copy paste that for you guys as well. Stick that right there, make this all smaller so it fits. So let's just make everything smaller so this fits better. There we go. So harmony collectivism is the norm for East Asians, and there is a focus on preserving harmony and avoidance of rocking the boat. So you don't want to make anybody upset because the group is more important than the individual. Emotional expression is not emphasized. Now, as a comparison, right, the Latino culture being collectivist, it's very different. There is a focus on being emotional and relating through emotions and being open and frequently emotional, right? So that's to say that it's really important to notice that not all collectivists are the same, right? That's really important to notice. Not all are the same. So just because someone comes from a collectivist culture, that doesn't mean automatically that they aren't from an emotional culture. Maybe we should ask, right? Maybe they have a different experience. Maybe their family is East Asian first generation, but they're American American first generation. Or excuse me. So maybe they're East Asian originally, they're from there, from an East Asian country. And now your client that's sitting in front of you is the first generation of being in America, in the United States. And so that's good information because they grew up in a house perhaps that is focused on no emotional expression, and then they come to the United States and there's high emotional expression. They might have a very conflicted cultural view, right? And so this information can be very useful in working with clients, talking about how did they grow up in terms of emotional expression, things like that. So this is a chart I found on ResearchGate on engagement and well-being. And so it has to do with the engagement and well-being of a worker, if you will. And there's high versus low well-being down the middle. And then across the middle is the low level of engagement to high level of engagement. So the person that has low well-being and has low level of engagement is distressed and disengaged from life or from work. If there's low well-being and a high level of engagement, they'll be distressed but functional. More normal functioning is in the higher well-being, or the at least moderate well-being, moderate level of engagement. So the low level of engagement with high well-being is the acquiescent, happy non-worker. And the high well-being, high level of engagement person is the happy worker that is flourishing. So they're really happy and they're really engaged. They're flourishing, if you will. that's a way to look at engagement with well-being, how those are related. Work, achievement, generativity, and well-being. So predictors of happiness, work experience, and sense of self. As a competent worker is a predictor. Individuals report generally positive emotions about work and satisfaction based on congruence between personality characteristics and skills and qualities required for the job. Workplace characteristics contribute to well-being. Opportunities for personal control and the variety of tasks are there. Those are important. There's support of the supervisor, interpersonal contact. There's a relationship with the supervisor. They have good pay and fringe benefits. They respect, and they have respect as well as status, which supports the idea that all work and no play leads to a diminished life. And so you can actually go backwards to the image I was just showing you, well-being versus engagement. Where is the happiness? Where is the functioning at, right? So universal needs and values and well-being. So meeting basic psychological needs is the source of well-being. There are different kinds of well-being, however. There's hedonic, which is emphasis on happiness and positive emotions, a subjective well-being, SWB. Eudaimonic, which is the sense of purpose, growth, mastery, and having personal expressiveness. There are 6 elements of psychological well-being: autonomy, personal growth, self-acceptance, purpose, mastery, and relatedness. And they're fulfilled in different ways across the lifespan. So you can experience autonomy in different ways when you're 14 versus 55. Personal growth from when you're 20 to 40. Self-acceptance from when you're 10 to 80, right? Purpose, mastery, relatedness, all the same. And it's often difficult to balance meeting hedonic and eudaimonic needs because sometimes they can be conflictual, or maybe one can be more demanding than the other. And so it might take away from being able to fulfill the other kind. So I found this graphic that was originally made by Dr. Paul T. Wong, but it was posted by Gokeman 2021 in a ResearchGate article, which you can pause this and go to that link if you'd like, or just pause it, Google different types of well-being and go to the images, and this should pop right up. But you see how physical well-being is at the center of everything. So if that's missing, it makes everything else kind of secondary. You got to get the physical well-being right before the rest can be focused on. So you've got moral well-being, spiritual, existential. What's my purpose? What do I do? What am I doing here? Do I belong? Psychological well-being, developmental well-being, economical well-being, communal well-being, having to do with the community, getting along with others, and political well-being. Excuse me. Okay. So you can see here, there's a lot of different angles to developing well-being. It's not just singly faceted. There are multiple components here, right? So why is this important to know? Our clients, when they come in, they are not single layered people. They have many layers. They are very multifaceted. They live different parts of life. And this is honestly kind of in line with the way that I do a cost benefit analysis with my clients. You may remember that I put that up on the slides for a different presentation, a different lecture, where that's the pros and the cons, the advantages and the disadvantages of making any given decision. I think I used it for alcoholism. But whenever clients make decisions, they are not one angled, right? When they come into my office, they say, I want a divorce. That's not just getting rid of your roommate, right? That's a moral decision, a spiritual decision, existential maybe, psychological perhaps, developmental, economical, communal, political, moral, physical. All these different things could be playing a role or be affected, if you will, if that decision to divorce is made, right? Maybe this person is a strong Muslim, and so divorce, they don't maybe believe in it, or maybe they're Mormon and they don't believe in it. Or maybe the person is a pastor and their community, it's going to have a big impact on their ministry. Or maybe it's an economical decision. Maybe they're a stay-at-home parent and their partner makes all the money. That's going to be a very burdensome decision to make to get a divorce. Not to say that they shouldn't get it, but it's something to consider and think about in their decision-making process, right? So while these things offer well-being when stabilized and fulfilled, they can also be something that helps you make decisions with hard choices. So the importance of meaning, there's a need for meaning that is intrinsic to humans. There's global meaning, what human existence is about. And then there's situational meaning, which involves finding your purpose and significance. So you see global is big, situational is more individual. And you are going to run into clients that are maybe struggling with both. I just don't know what the purpose of life is. I just don't know what my purpose is. How did humans get here? How did I get here? Why do I matter? Why am I significant? Right? You can see this being something that clients in later stages of life deal with, or any other stage of life, where they're just reflecting on, what am I doing here? And why am I spending my time the way that I do? Or how should I be spending my time? We need to understand our lives for 4 purposes, 4 reasons: to have purpose and goals, to have autonomy and control in meeting your goals, our goals, to define legitimate actions, values, morals, and ethics to guide our behavior, to feel valued and foster self-worth. And interestingly, wealth may block development of true life satisfaction because it may be rooted in materialistic things. And so you're not developing values, morals, ethics, if you will. You may not be fostering self-worth, maybe because your wealth leads to buying things that give you worth, or buying things that give you happiness. But as we saw with that hedonic treadmill, that novice experience is going to wear off, right? So wealth can block true life satisfaction. That's not to say that it will, but it's possible that it can. So spirituality and meaning, religion or spirituality offers a source of meaning for some. What is the difference between those? So religion is more of the practice, prayer, attending church, making sure you do so many Hail Marys. It's like your checklist of stuff is religiosity, versus spirituality, in my opinion, is a connectedness of your spirit to a being outside yourself, a higher power, if you will. It could even be your connectedness to people or to Mother Nature. But spirituality has to do with the soul, and religiosity has to do with ritual. At least that's my view of the difference between those words. And it can offer a source of meaning for some. So let's say someone is a Christian, they really look at their life as having meaning from the standpoint of being a disciple and spreading the word of Jesus Christ and bringing other people to believe in God so that they can gain access to heaven, versus someone that is atheist perhaps and involved in PETA and sex trafficking initiatives. They're really interested and motivated that they're connected to, the world and the creatures around them, animals and humans alike. And they find that their purpose is to protect the living in whatever ways that they can, right? And so that sense of spirituality, that sense of connectedness to other spirits, other entities in life, it can definitely have a motivating force in one's life to live in certain ways. And then children are often socialized within the context of religious framework. So whether that's atheist or Muslim or agnostic or what have you, children are more often socialized with a religious framework growing up. There's a greater source of meaning in countries with difficult life conditions. So they might be more religious the worse the conditions are where they live. Religious affiliation is associated with better health outcomes and reduced coronary disease, lower blood pressure, less suicidality because of that sense of purpose, that belief in something greater. And worldwide religions prescribe regulation of negative emotions. So that's to say that all religions seek to reduce negative emotionality in their congregation or in their believers. So with regard to personality, high agreeableness and conscientiousness are associated with religiousness. And Piedmont, the sixth personality trait is related to spiritual transcendence. So religiosity, religious affiliation. I've seen a lot of clients come into my office and say, I believe in something, I just don't know what. And I often find that information out during the psychosocial assessment when I ask, do they have a religion or spirituality that they identify with? And I'll get Christian, Muslim, Catholic, Buddhist, Hinduism, Muslim, all kinds of different religions. People tell me Jewish. But sometimes I'll get I'm not really sure. And so what I'll say is, well, if you'd like to, I'd love to explore that with you, regardless of what it is you think you might believe in, and help educate you and figure out what you believe, because religious affiliation is actually associated with better health outcomes and increased, positive experience in life. And so if we can figure that out, I'd love to help you out with that. But it's totally up to you if you want to explore that area of your life. Right. So that's a way that you can apply that to counseling. Developmental shifts in spirituality and faith across the lifespan do exist. So for in Fowler's view, there are 6 stages in faith development. So from 0 to 6, there's the intuitive projective stage, where there's danger of doing wrong, so you're afraid of getting in trouble. It's ages 7 to 12, there's the mythic literal stage, where you repeat what you're taught as a person. From ages 13 to 20, there's synthetic conventional stage, where you're conformist in higher authority beyond the family. Right. Ages 21 to 30, you're going to have an intuitive and reflective stage, where you think critically about what you've been taught and commit to a worldview and have your own beliefs. Whether that means you accept what you were taught or you develop something new. And the conjunctive stage is ages 31 to 60, where you have post-formal thinking and you see both sides of a problem and appreciate the unknowable instead of being distressed by it. And over 60, there's universalizing stage, where you transcend specific belief systems and live with felt participation in a power that unifies and transforms the world. So how does this apply to counseling? This can help you with understanding how a client sitting in front of you relates to spirituality, perhaps if they have a normative spiritual development. That's to say they didn't go through any spiritual abuse or religious abuse or any kind of satanic involvement and things like that, that would be confusing to them. So this is a worksheet I often use that I love. So while it may be from an addiction recovery group, it can be used with anybody, regardless of whether or not they struggle with addiction, because sometimes a person is so depressed or anxious that they've been so focused on the depression or anxiety that they've forgotten what's important to them, what matters to them, because their mood hasn't been stable enough where they could get to that, right? So there's the website for it. I'll zoom in a little bit for you just so you can see what it is. So SMART recovery means smart management and recovery training recovery. They're a great group. It's an alternative to, excuse me, it's early. It's an alternative to a 12-step group. So SMART recovery is a non-12-step alternative to AA, NA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, all those different things, with no sponsor or anything. It's a great group. There's a lot of education that happens in them. There's even like a workbook that you can get. So values clarification, what is this? So your values are your ideas about what is most important to you in your life, what you want to live by and live for. They are silent forces behind many of your actions and decisions. The goal of values clarification is for you to become fully conscious of their influence and to explore and honestly acknowledge what you truly value at this time in your life. You can do more self-directed and you can be more self-directed and effective when you know which values you really choose to keep and live by as an adult, and which ones will get priority over others. Identify your values first and then rank your top 3 or 5. So interestingly, the worksheet, when completed at 25, can be very different when you're 50, right? So this doesn't have to be a one-time worksheet that you use with clients, but what I'll usually have them do is just go through and highlight or circle all the things that they think are important to them. And then maybe they can go back with another color and they can circle all the ones that, that they would like to make important to them. So go through highlight and then maybe pick your top 10. And an interesting way to use this with people in addiction is you can have them take their value list, and then they can write a 10th, 11th card that is alcohol or their drug of choice. And you can do these on an index card if you want to. It's actually a really powerful example if you use index cards, but you write each of your values on their own individual card, and then you'd write the substance on a separate card, and then you tell them to put them in order of importance during their addiction issues. And you'll often see that the substance gets put on top, and you can run through the exercise. Okay, how did marijuana and methamphetamine help you be married? Well, it didn't. It made me get a divorce. Okay, so in that way, how did it hurt your ability to be married? Well, it led to my spouse not trusting me and eventually divorcing me because I couldn't stay clean, and she kept finding my meth pipe and my marijuana, blunts everywhere. And, it really didn't help me with being married at all, even though that's a value I have. Okay, let's keep going. How did marijuana and meth help you have peace and quiet in your life? Well, when I was high, everything was good. Okay, well, what about when you were not high? No, it didn't help at all. And so you're helping to build the insight that their substance use actually didn't help. Their addiction actually didn't help as much as they may have thought it did. It actually hurt a lot more. And it helps them see their priorities are out of whack, right? So this can also just be used with a regular client that, or not regular client, a client that doesn't have addiction issues. It's a wonderful worksheet. I love it so much. And if you want to pause this, yes, that's supposed to say smartne.org. You can also just Google values clarification with Smart Recovery if you want, but you can write this down or, excuse me, pause this and type that into your browser. Okay, great worksheet. Love it so much. I don't know if I've already said this, but since working virtually from home since March 2020, I have over 800 bookmarks saved on my web browser. So don't be afraid to use handouts, worksheets, websites, articles, all these different kinds of things to support the treatment that you do, because I use them almost every single session. Granted, a client doesn't want to just vent the whole time, which sometimes you get that, and that's fine. But yes, values clarification exercise. Love this handout. Okay, culture and well-being. So dimensions of well-being across the globe. It measures, the measures are based on income, social, psychological well-being, positive feelings, and low negativity. The US is the highest in income, and the Denmark is the lowest and highest in well-being, excuse me. The poorest countries are ranked lowest in well-being. And there are some tables in your book, table 14.3 and table 14.4, with happiness ranks that you can go look at. And there is a current rise in happiness in Scandinavia due to income equality, less extreme highs and lows in overall satisfaction, and contentment through equanimity and acceptance. Stress coping and well-being in midlife. So resilience is key to well-being with changes in midlife. A Wisconsin study identified multiple pathways to resilience. There is an analysis of later life health and satisfaction, where fast starters have more depression later in life because maybe they get a lot done and so they run out of things to do. I don't know exactly the angle that that's taking, but it's just to say that fast starters have more depression later in life. Very educated and partnered and moderately educated and family groups have the lowest symptoms of depression. So that's to say the more education you've acquired and the more, and if you're partnered with a spouse, you have likely to have lower symptoms of depression. And then educated singles are high in work satisfaction and high in depression. There's also midlife role strain, where the demands are too great for available resources. That can happen for your clients, and that's just something to look for. So, are the demands on what they're being asked to do greater than what they can offer. That's a lot of stress. Protective factors for this are social support, adequate income, and multiple productive roles. These are things that are protective factors from stress, if you will. So here's an image that I found from Perlman 2019. It was posted on Twitter. I couldn't find where it originally came from, so maybe she made it herself. I'm not sure. But these are some different pathways to resilience. So what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back from setbacks in our lives. It is the way we can prevent stress from causing serious physical, mental, and emotional issues. Practicing positive and often simple activities can actually retrain our brain to be more resilient. So these are some different things that you can do depending on age or whether it's everyone. So children, positive pathways to resilience involve having positive role models, supportive adults, parental involvement, a caring community, increased parent-infant contact, so parents spending more time with their kids, and having increased knowledge of child development. So educating kiddos on their development and how it works, and you will bounce back from this and da, 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 da. For adults, you want to acknowledge their trauma. They can acknowledge their trauma, seek support, identify emotional triggers, get mental health and substance abuse treatment with a therapist, whether that's in outpatient individual counseling, couples counseling, marriage counseling, PHP, partial hospitalization programming, or IOP, intensive outpatient, which is where you do group treatment, either 15 to 20 hours a week. You go from like 8 to noon, and then you go home. Or inpatient treatment maybe is warranted if they need medication or they need to be kept safe because of homicidal, suicidal feelings. And then everyone can build resilience through having supportive relationships, taking a walk in the woods, just being outside. Unless, of course, if it is possible to be allergic to the sun. There was a woman whose story I watched. She had to wear this like UV shield anytime she went outside, or it would severely burn her skin, and she had to wear gloves and all these different things anytime she would go outside. So of course, if you have severe allergies to pine trees, I have allergies to pine trees, and I'm in Houston. There's literally one across from my apartment right now. Walking in the woods, it may not be the best thing. So you of course want to do these things as appropriate for any particular person. Eating healthy foods, practicing gratitude. And if clients are like, oh, there's nothing I can be grateful for. Well, let's create things that you're grateful for. How can you be happy with your life if you're not doing things that make you happy? Well, that's a good point. Right. When I throw that one out to clients, they often, well, you're right. Right. How can you expect yourself to be happy if you only ever think sad thoughts or negative thoughts? Makes it pretty hard. So you can also smile, laugh, talk about your feelings, produce hope, foster hope, volunteer, listen to music, and engage with art, whether that means making it or just looking at it. These are all ways to train your brain to be more resilient. Stress, a review. So there are two varieties of stressors. So there's life events and then daily hassles. So stress accumulation can lead to allostatic load. Epigenetic modifications alter genes related to stress systems. So the stress system. So an initial episode leads to residual changes and greater reactivity in your stress system. And intermittent exposure to triggers results in sensitization, progressive illness severity, or incidence. So that's to say, the more often you're exposed to triggers, it can make you sensitive to them, and you can develop illness because of the severity of stress that you're encountering. Absolutely, it is true. Stress can make you sick. It drops your immune system. So stress and growth factors contribute to positive development. Post-traumatic growth via cognitive processing, qualitative shifts in schemata about the self and the world. And they're related to certain personality traits. So that's to say that after a trauma, growth happens through processing cognitively what happened and changing the quality of your schemes about yourself and the world. So challenging core beliefs, right? Looking at that can help with overcoming stress and growing. Okay. Coping with stress. Coping needs to accommodate cognitive decision-making as well as emotional aspects of stress. So cognitive would look like decision making, perhaps, and emotional would look like anxiety management, depression management, anger management, irritability management, all these different feelings people can have because of stress. It should not be oversimplified as two distinctive types of problems. Stress is multifaceted for sure. Conservation of resources theory says that loss is a primary stress trigger, and it's relevant to the midlife, and it emphasizes centrality of loss experience. There is a tendency to weigh resource loss greater than resource gain. So loss is more impactful than gaining is. To deal with loss, there's a tendency to act in ways that conserve resources. We want to minimize our cost to our net resource capacity. And if you look at your book in table 14.5, there are systematic preferences and coping behaviors within cultural groups listed there, right? So looking at this in the counseling setting, you want to look at, okay, how is the stress affecting the person sitting in front of you? Is it affecting their cognitive process? Is it affecting their emotions? Is it affecting their health? What is it affecting, if anything? And then you want to help them gain awareness of that so they can start to create a plan for addressing their well-being. And a great way that you can do that, another resource. So this is a self-care assessment from Therapist Aid. If you are planning on being a therapist and practicing, this is a glorious free resource. And I can tell you that becoming a therapist, you're going to love anything that is free, because there is some stuff that is expensive, like psychology tools. Those used to be free, and now it's like $60 a year to access their stuff. Therapist Aid's holding out, still good and free and wonderful. And they got a lot of worksheets, quizzes, educational tools, and different things that you can use with adults, children, teenagers, anybody really. It's great. So zooming in to let you see what this looks like. So it's not going to be totally picture perfect because it's a little fuzzy. But the self-care assessment, if you go look at it, you can do a rating of 1, 2, or 3. I do it poorly, where I don't, but rarely or not at all do it. I do it okay. I do it sometimes, or I do it well. I do this often. And you'd mark 1, 2, or 3 next to each thing. And then you put a star next to what you want to improve upon or do more frequently. So it's really cool because it has a physical self-care component, psychological, emotional self-care component, social self-care component, spiritual self-care, and professional. So it's looking at all sides of the self, right? So it's a great little assessment. And I often give it to clients as, okay, your homework assignment is to do the self-care assessment and try to do some of the things that you identify that you want to improve upon. So when we come back next week, I want to hear about what you came up with, what did it reveal to you, and what you did to try to work on your self-care. Because self-care isn't just bubble baths and taking walks. It can look like those things, but that's not all there is to it. It's multifaceted. Okay. And then there's also this self-care wheel that Safe House posted. And it's also just demonstrating the multifaceted side of the self, which that self-care assessment just showed. And so life balance happens when there's a balance of all of these things. And so you can pause this if you want, or you can Google self-care wheel and this will pop right up. But it talks about what are things that you can do within each area to experience self-care. So physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, personally, and professionally. Stressors and the body mind. So the body mobilizes energy to enhance functions for fight or flight, which is the motor and sensory abilities. Your immune system mobilizes energy to fight pathogens. So your immune system releases energy whenever it's trying to keep you from getting sick. And the systems direct energy to different ends, goes to different ends during a stress event. So there are effects of chronic stress in midlife. So you experience cardiovascular decline, dysregulation of immune functions, and immunosuppression, meaning that your body can fight off illness less well as you're getting older. Endorphins on immune system cells are evidence of connections between the brain, immune system, and emotions. So that's to say, if your immune system's crappy, your mood's more likely to be crappy. Okay. Neuroimmunology is the study of the interactions between the central nervous system, immune system, and behavior. And there is a figure on 14.3 in your book about that you can go look at. Why does this matter? It's an educational piece for your clients. You know, the more stressed you are, the more likely you're going to be sick. The more sick you are, the more likely you're going to be stressed. We got to take care of you. Do you want to be stressed? Do you want to be sick? Do you want to be ill and unwell? Usually people are going to say no. And so you can use that as motivation to help them start finding out the things that can help reduce the stressors on their mind and body. Wellness, some psychological resilience factors are listed in table 14.6 and include positive attitude, active coping, seeking solutions, cognitive flexibility, finding value in adversity instead of just, oh my gosh, look at this adversity that I went to. No, try to kind of silver lining stuff. Look at what did the adversity teach you? Okay. So while losing my job was really awful, I showed myself that I can survive being fired and I'm still capable of working a different job. It's not the end of the world if one job ends, I can find others. There are other places I can apply and that I can get hired to, perhaps, right? Moral compass is a resilience factor, right? They have a sense of what's right and wrong that they try to follow. Physical exercise and social support, as well as role models and mentors are resilience factors. Positive emotions are pivotal for well-being and stress management. Qualities of positive emotions can be cultivated, and appraisal, part of coping, is a target for cognitive behavioral interventions geared towards self-efficacy, mastery, and control. And affectivity connection, positive and negative emotions separate neurobiological systems. Negative affectivity is part of the behavioral inhibition system and activates the right prefrontal cortex for negative emotions. And positive affectivity is part of the behavioral facilitation system. It activates the left prefrontal cortex during positive emotions. Positive and negative affectivity circuits are independent of each other. Protections are strengthening emotion regulation, reducing anxiety, and cultivating positive emotions. Mindfulness neuroscience shows that mind-body systems benefit from executive functions, emotion management, and self-awareness. So it behooves your clients to practice mind-body awareness, controlling decision-making, executive functions, managing their emotions, having them be in control instead of out of control, and being aware of the self instead of being totally mindlessly functioning. Be aware of how you feel, what you say, what you do, all these things. They can benefit your decision-making and well-being. Applications, fostering wellness, help clients find paths to wellness with these practices, help them develop social skills, identify maladaptive thoughts, cultivate practices of well-being, gratitude, reflection, journaling, recognize client expectations about their well-being, support client lifestyle changes that promote well-being, recognize the harmful effect of excessive materialism on well-being. So maybe you might work in a high SES area where you have clients coming in with a different Gucci or Louis Vuitton bag every week, or different Michael Kors or whatever, coming in your office with these different things. And that could be, I noticed each week that you have a different expensive purse, or you get a different expensive car. Can we maybe talk about that? What's the reasoning behind that? I think that we could look at some different ways to give you more consistent or stable life fulfillment instead of just this stuff and these things, right? Support workplace efforts to improve personal autonomy and access to community-based programs promoting greater well-being could be a way to foster more wellness. Mindfulness, work with the mind's own plasticity. So the mind has the capacity for reducing negative reactivity, increasing curiosity and interest through present moment and somatic awareness. So what is somatic awareness? That is awareness of the physical symptom manifestation as a result of emotions that you're experiencing, right? So do I have an upset stomach? Do I have a lump in my throat? Do I have a headache? Right? You can de-emphasize the role of thinking and verbal analysis, rather structure the world through thought, right? So instead of analyzing what they think in terms of like trying to dismantle it, try to develop maybe a more positive look at the world or more helpful thoughts about the world, which would be cognitive restructuring. Right? You can go deep into it, do a psychoanalytic or psycho dynamic approach and try to look at what's the meaning, why do they think what they think, where did it come from, all that stuff. But you don't necessarily have to. You can just do cognitive restructuring and help them identify where the cognitive distortions are in their thoughts about the world. Again, I think I've said I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, so that's my bread and butter, thought restructuring. So mindfulness awareness is acquired through repeated practice. So that's to say, if you give a client a homework assignment to go practice mindfulness, week one might not go so great because it takes time to build it. You want to bring attention to the present moment and replace patterns of reactivity. So the goal, I've not said this to y'all yet, you want to go from being reactive to becoming responsive, because reactive is very animalistic and impulsive in nature, versus responsivity is pause, reflect, decide, and do. Whereas reactive is, I just do it. I'm not gonna think about it. I'm just gonna react. Someone punches me, I'm gonna punch him back in the face. Versus someone punches me in the face. Well, wait a minute. I'm a PhD student. I'd like to be hired at a university someday. I shouldn't punch someone in the face. That could really go negatively for me. I don't need a police record for public intoxication or whatever might come out of that. I'm not going to swing back. So my response is instead to walk away and find a police officer and file a report or whatever, but don't react and swing back. Mindfulness-based stress reductions on the rise, MBSR, practice in working with attention, relaxed observing, and awareness. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, I use a lot of that as well. And the results of these is improvement in physical and psychological functioning. Also, forgiveness is applicable here. Forgiveness therapy maps the forgiveness process. So there's the uncovering, decision, work, and deepening phases. There's actually a worksheet from Therapist Aid that is on forgiveness. There's so many topics. You just need to go click on that website and click around. You'll find a lot of really great stuff. You don't have to do it now, but even when you become a licensed therapist, you can. But I would argue that the more resources you're exposed to before you get started, it's a means for education and feeling more prepared when you do start seeing your clients in practicum and internship. So the uncovering phase is where you examine the traumatic injury or event, the thing that hurt you that warrants forgiveness. So you want to recognize and confront anger and shame and readjust the old view. Notice that it says shame there. Sometimes forgiveness needs to be towards oneself, or shame might be related to the injury that was done. So like, for example, I had a client that experienced incestuous trauma, sexual trauma as a child. And so there was a lot of shame that that client went through that. They were ashamed that their sibling did sexual things to them as a child. And then there's anger that happened. And there's embarrassment that happened. And so you as a therapist have the ability to create a safe space to explore a trauma, to explore this forgiveness and let out their actual feelings, because maybe they would never say it to the perpetrator. But they can do an empty chair technique with you, right? Which is where, if you haven't learned about it already, it's where there's an empty chair and a client imagines that someone that they would want to talk to, or someone you as the therapist have the intuition that they need to have a conversation with. They look at the empty chair and they have that conversation, right? To be able to have a cathartic release. So decision phase is facing the realization of burden and of rage or revenge. And you see the benefits of forgiveness to physical and emotional well-being. The work phase is where you encourage perspective taking and empathy towards the perpetrator, perhaps. And it's not saying that it's okay what happened, but it's just developing understanding of why maybe the perpetrator did what they did. And then deepening stage involves constructing a narrative to account for their painful experience, and they allow the episode to become integrated into a meaningful life story. So instead of just being a victim of what happened to you, being an overcomer and a survivor and a thriver as a result, or in spite of whatever happened. Worthington model is the reach model. So you recall the offense, you develop empathy for the offender, you offer forgiveness as altruism, commit to forgive, and hold to forgiveness. Like I said, there's a great worksheet on Therapist Aid that puts all of this into play, and it makes it a worksheet where you write things down and you answer them and reflect on these different things. Applications, also self-compassion. So coming to terms with one's own life story, very salient during midlife. Excuse me, lots of talking makes me yawn. There's a developmental tendency to take stock in midlife, like how far have I come? What have I done? Let me do an inventory of how much I like or dislike my life. There's also self-acceptance of a life's work, loving the neighbor and the self. Self-acceptance, self-compassion offer advantages to personal happiness, adjustment, and physical health. There's a loving kindness exercise that you can do where you practice benevolence directed first towards yourself and your friends, then neutral acquaintances, and then enemies. So that's a way to increase happiness because you offer loving kindness to self and to others, and you don't hold on to resentment, negative emotion. Well-being is not just the absence of disorder. It's also a deliberate cultivation of those elements that make life worthwhile. The end. Now time for some questions. Today's a long one. Sorry about that. So chapter 14 questions. In research studies, the term subjective well-being is often used synonymously with which of the following terms? Fulfillment, happiness, physical and mental health, and physical and mental activity. Happiness. In what ways do personality traits correlate with measures of subjective well-being? A, B, C, or D? How do personality traits correlate with subjective well-being? C, conscientiousness correlates positively. In terms of psychological well-being, self-realization is best interpreted as which of the following? Coming to grips with one's limitations, learning from one's life experiences, finding one's true meaning or value, or achieving congruence between personality and behavior. Finding one's true meaning or value. Many individuals struggle with highly challenging life circumstances, such as debilitating accidents or the death of a loved one, and emerge with improvements in psychological functioning. What term identifies this phenomenon? Kindling sensitization, role strain, post-traumatic growth, or stressor predispositions? Post-traumatic growth. Daniel is very extroverted. He admits that he is not comfortable unless surrounded by other people, and he energetically pursues activities that require the company of others. His cousin Bill, about the same age, is very introverted. Bill is self-reflective and prefers more solitary pursuits. Based on these personality characteristics alone, what can you predict about the subjective well-being of Daniel and Bill? Daniel is probably happier than Bill. Bill is probably happier than Daniel. Daniel and Bill are probably equally happy, and personality has no bearing on subjective well-being. Which one can you predict about the subjective well-being of Daniel and Bill? Daniel's probably happier than Bill. If you recall, being surrounded by people is a way to enhance subjective well-being. One thing that both Eastern and Western religions share is that they promote A, a belief in reincarnation, B, the regulation of negative or destructive emotions, C, the cultivation of strong positive emotions, or D, the practice of elaborate public rituals. A, B, C, or D? B, the regulation of negative or destructive emotions. Anna is a 44-year-old divorced mother of 2 teenagers. Anna's father, who lives alone in a nearby suburb, has recently been diagnosed with lung cancer. Anna needs to take her father to and from medical appointments while she tries to manage the demands of her own full-time job. She goes to the employee assistance counselor at work for help in coping with the demands of her situation. The counselor understands that the demands on Anna are too great given her available resources, a phenomenon called role buffering, role confusion, role strain, or role multiplicity. So the demands on Anna are too great given her available resources. Which one of those terms best aligns with that? Great way to take test 2. Underline the parts that are important for a question's answer. Role strain. Psychological stressors operate on the immune system in much the same way as cytokines, sleep, endorphins, or infectious agents. Infectious agents. A positive emotional style is a trait inherited by only some individuals, is a state of mind that depends upon environmental circumstances, can be cultivated by everyone, or is a characteristic that is present in everyone in childhood, but that people lose in adulthood because of various pressures. A, B, C, or D. C, can be cultivated by everyone. Good hope. I am a believer, and I believe counselors should be a believer in everyone is capable of change. Everyone is capable of making improvement in their life. Now, that's not to say a psychopath or sociopath can develop empathy, which we don't want to teach them empathy because that can become a tool for manipulation later. But a positive emotional style, motion regulation can be something that even the psychopath, sociopath can develop. And last question, intentionally paying attention to one's present experience without judgment is a definition for stress management, mindfulness, relaxation, or coping. Paying attention to one's present experience is what? Mindfulness. Okay, so some questions for the comments. Just like clients, therapists, and other mental health professionals are capable of burning out. What do you plan to do to maintain your own wellness when you become a therapist? You can put that in the comments below if you'd like. And 2, what aspects of well-being do you think will be most difficult for you to take care of for yourself, and why? And you can pause this and use this little image if you want, or you can go back to that slide if you want a bigger image. But I just put that bubble there for you to access or utilize if you want. Please feel free to leave your answers in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next and final lecture on chapter 15 of the Lifespan textbook. Thank you.